Story 1, this is Fireteam Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to Military Veteran Dad, episode 69. It's hard to believe we are inching closer and closer to episode 100. It's going to be a surreal moment when I reach that pivot because that is going to be one big mountain that I've climbed, and it's the first big monument that most podcasters climb to, and I'm just excited to do it along with you. And if this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. I know you have choices where to listen to podcasts, and I'm awesome and appreciative that you chose this podcast. If this is you're a longtime listener, thank you for your continuing support. Your support means the world to me. As we go through coronavirus, I want to remind everyone out there to try to find a way to grow through this. Find something that you can do to make this something that improves you as big as a step that you can handle. Whether you have more time, maybe you've lost your job, whatever you do, this is an opportunity for growth. And I've said it 1,000 times now as I've talked to people over the last few weeks. There's only one way through coronavirus, and that is to grow through it. And if you've been following me, I've been talking about here and there that I have started a 75 hard challenge. That 75 hard challenge, as of today, April 13th, I am on day 20, and I can already feel the transformation. I can already feel the discipline, and I can already feel the consistency that comes with doing 5 things for 5 days or for 20 days and continuing on that long road up to day 75. But there is no going back. There's no going back to day 1. There's only one way forward, and that's to day 75. So I'm excited to report to you guys when I reach that and to give you a full report on what 75 hard did for me. If you want to check out more of that, Andy Frisella's podcast can be found at 75hard.com. He did about 2 episodes on this that explain the whole thing, and he also breaks down the overall process and gives you the basic steps, which is not that hard. So getting started today with today's episode, we kind of have an interesting one. We have the former executive vice president of operations for the Walt Disney World Resort, Lee Cockerell. As a senior operation executive for 10 years, Lee led a team of 40,000 cast members. It's an interesting note. They call them cast members, not employees, because everybody is part of the show, and was responsible for the operations of 20 resorts, 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, and a shopping entertainment village, and the ESPN Sports and Recreation Complex, in addition to the ancillary operations, which supported the #1 vacation destination in the world. One of Lee's major accomplishments and lasting legacies was the creation of the Disney Great Leadership Strategies, which was used to train and develop the 7,000 leaders at Walt Disney World Resort. Lee has an amazing story. He's done USO tours in Iraq. He has a veteran of himself. He suffered through depression and anxiety and growing up with kind of an imposter syndrome and trying to prove himself, and really had to do a whole bunch of growing to take what happened to him and make it happen for him in his life, and to go from the story where he came from to where the point where he was the one known for helping create the Disney magic that creates the Walt Disney Resort today. That is an amazing story, and I'm excited to bring it to you because it came to us because I randomly ran into him at a booth in PodFest in Orlando a few weeks ago before the world got crazy and Normal was canceled. And we just talk about life, and his perspective is something we don't often get, that he's at the toward the wiser of his life, and he's able to reflect back and just look at the different ways that his lessons as being a dad, his lessons of being a grandfather, his lessons in marriage, what really mattered, what really didn't, and how he's been able to gift that wisdom to other people in his life and the different institutes that he talks to. He does public speaking. He has multiple books. The man knows his stuff, but he knows it through trials and errors of his own life. And I'm really excited to bring you this interview. So without further ado, let's introduce Lee Cockerell. Good morning, Lee. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey there. Good to be with you. Thank you.
I am excited for this interview. More excited just the randomness of how this podcast interview happened, of me standing at a booth where you were randomly coming up to find someone that wasn't actually there yet.
And then I found out what you do, and I was just super excited by that idea. And this is one of the coolest parts about podcasting is because you get to talk to amazing people like yourself, and that access. I mean, podcast is one of the very few mediums that allows for a lot of those in-depth connections that happen with people at different levels of interest within society and what they've done. Like it's a beautiful tool. And I'm sure as a podcaster yourself, you know that you can connect with amazing conversations as well.
Yeah, I like that part of it too, meeting people.
Mm-hmm. It's the best part of podcasting, I think, because meeting people is something we've lost touch with in the last 15, 20 years. And podcasting provides that intimate depth to the humanism that people miss by having those one-to-one conversations that you don't get on a phone, you don't get from Facebook. And hopefully it sparks enough conversation or interest that they take that into the real world. Yeah,
I agree. Good deal.
So one thing when I was researching what I wanted to talk about with you was at Walt Disney World, I'm not sure what the culture was before you got in, but I'd like to talk about how you made family a priority within the Walt Disney culture. Was it a priority in the way that it was after you left before you started?
I think back, I joined Disney in 1990, and we were just coming out of the 80s where most of corporate cultures were pretty much do what we tell you. We're not interested in your opinion. Leadership meant 2 or 3 people that make all the decisions. And it was pretty autocratic back in those days. And I'd just come out of Marriott where really quite a family environment where they really wanted you to have 2 days off a week. They worked with you on issues if you had a family issue. So we started working on that at Disney and trying to make it a place where everybody felt like they could have a whole life, a total life. And, there's a lot of stress and a lot going on in Walt Disney World. It's open all the time. We got all those hotels and Disney Springs and 4 parks. And so the pressure is always on. And the other part of the pressure is the same as probably is in the military. We want to be great. We want to be the best. When you want to be the best, it makes it even more effort and more pressure. Yeah. So, we worked on it. We started clarifying what leadership meant, that it meant more about taking care of your folks and less about all about you. And I think that was true in the military too. The officers, I think, really learn and know, and sergeants, and when the list of people come in, that deep down they've got to take care of them. And so when you get into the battle, that people are committed. They're with you. They trust you.
And that's why the DOD spends so much money on family readiness, because they know if your family's not taken care of when you're back, your head's not in the game when you're in war.
Absolutely. You can't be worrying about something else when you're focused on something, a mission. And so it's all connected, I believe. If your family's in good shape and you're happy at home, you do a better job. Yeah. And you're more focused, and you have a better attitude, and you're nicer to people. And because once anxiety sets in, as you know, in the military, anxiety and depression can create an absence of paying attention to the things that really matter, including yourself. Life is a balance. You got to get it as right as you can. And a lot of times the stress of life, and certainly in the military, causes you to lose sight of that. And I think your podcast is a good idea because it brings back, let's get refocused on what's really important. And it's probably, when I was early out in my career, I thought most important thing was my title, and could I get a company car one day, and stock options and salary and blah. And I wrote a book, Career Magic, and I put it there. I said, I chased magic around the world, and I finally found out it was my health and my family. So it took me a while.
You wrote a blog post maybe almost 10 years now, I think, if I remember the date on it, about a CEO that was given a speech that completely almost like cratered your world because he talked about the one thing that he wished he did more of, which was family. Can you go back to that moment and what that transition was like when you first had that moment?
I was working with some generals that were at Walt Disney World the chief of staff of the Army had brought them there for leadership training for a week. They do that because Central Command is over in Tampa. So there was about 15 maybe 1-star, 2-star generals there, and different companies were speaking to them. I did, American Express, all kinds of different people, giving them perspective and a point of view on different ways of leadership and management and how to think about things. And I talked about my life and what I'd been through and how I'd managed it and taken care of it and what was important. And one of the generals came up to me afterwards. I don't know if this is a story you're thinking about, but he told me, he said, I think I really screwed up my life. I don't think I paid enough attention to my child. I don't think I paid attention to my son. We don't have the strongest, best relationship right now because I was absent and not paying attention. And certainly you can be absent, but you can still be there. And I think a lot of people think just because you're out of the country or you're off working double days and have a lot of stress and pressure that you can't stay connected. And, so much people think about, well, I don't spend enough time with my kids. Well, it's probably more important how you spend the time with them when you have some time, that you focus on them, you take them out to the park, you go to their school event if you can. Today with technology, there's no excuse for not checking in and telling them, hey, you love them and telling them good night. And kids, I had that same issue at Marriott, and I was traveling 5 days a week, and I'd come home. My son was young, but when I was traveling, every single night I talked to him. I talked to him about what was going on in his life, and about the time they become 12 or 13, they don't care about you anyway. So it's those early days of collecting, and they want to talk to their dad. We got all this ability to do that today with technology, so it's even less of an excuse than we could have had back in the day when we didn't have cell phones and that kind of connection. So
you had to pay the hotel's long distance bill.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I just made a point of having the right thinking about that, because I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family. My mother was married 5 times. I was adopted twice. I got my name Cockerell when I was 16. I dropped out of college because I wasn't a good student. So I had a lot of insecurities, and I just
you had a lot of reasons not to be successful.
Exactly, and I did not want that to translate into my son. And today, when I give a speech and I tell what I just told you about mine, my son says, "Well, I grew up and I had no problems." He said, "So I don't have any excuses for anything. I just can tell you that I had a good relationship with my dad, and he was always there, and I'm totally normal while he may be screwed up." But I say, after all that, I'm totally normal. Not really. But, you can decide to change it. It's a decision, whether it's abuse or alcohol or drugs or divorce or all these things that get in our way when we're kind of messed up from the way we were raised, or insecurities, or in not believing in ourselves, low self-esteem.
Is there a particular story or an event from your past that you continued to use throughout your life as almost like a tool versus an obstacle?
Oh yeah. First 10 years of my career, I was pretty tough. I didn't know much about leadership. I was insecure, so I wanted to get ahead. So I just kind of abused my authority and made people do things, and I didn't care much about them. But I went through some events where I started to change. I started going to seminars. I started reading more. I started looking at leaders I really had a lot of respect for, that made me comfortable. I trusted them, and I had to have a good conversation with myself, because we don't usually see ourselves the way we are as much as people see us the way we are. And I would think as I went through that, I really had much more empathy for people. I really, maybe to an excess sometimes, I would really work with somebody over and over and over again, try to get them turned around. I tell people today, in my opinion, if you can have empathy and discipline, you can be pretty successful at home and at work. You got to have the empathy to understand and tell that little 6-year-old that he's got to go in timeout and I love you. And then you got to have the discipline to do it. So somebody told me, when you're disciplining the 6 or 7 or 8-year-old, you're disciplining the 25-year-old you want them to be. And so it's empathy, yes. my mother's always had a lot of empathy. I think generally they tell you they kick your butt in the morning, and then they tell you they love you, and then at night they do both. And nobody, if you had a great mother, you saw empathy and discipline in action.
Yeah.
I always tell people, when you got problems, call your mom. She'll tell you what to do.
I like your story because I think there's a lot that resonates with military dads where I think in those early days, you probably felt on the inside maybe like a little bit broken, like not finished or a little bit dysfunctional. And so on the outside, you had to try to keep up this facade. But then as you grow through that, you realize that's actually not who you're coming across. You're coming across as someone that people don't even really like. And you have to do that inner work. And a lot of veterans suffer from that, from either PTSD or war, that they have these scars on the inside that they try to hide on the outside. But those two worlds don't coexist in a way that actually produces a positive result that you actually want in your life. Did you see that similar thing?
Well, absolutely. I was the perfect guy. Nothing bothered Lee. He could take all the stress. I never got upset. I never raised my voice. I was perfect. And then I went through a tough situation with my wife, almost dying, and I ended up with anxiety and depression. I still take medication from that. It triggered it. Hey there, young man.
Hey, hi. Nope.
Hi.
He's too sad.
There you go.
Life happens on the Dad Podcast.
Empathy and discipline.
Yes. And patience, which isn't something he practices.
Patience is a big one.
Yeah.
But so, as you just got to figure out that if you're in a leadership position, and I tell everybody today, you're a leader wherever you are at every point in your life. It's really not about, are you a sergeant, are you a general, or are you that role modeling and that influence you have on other people around you is so big. I tell people, don't underestimate the influence. If you're positive, you may be helping somebody a lot, or if you'll listen to them, or I think we all underestimate the impact we can have on other people.
I do that often a lot. I've become so vulnerable over the years just through podcasting and being around great people. I don't even really realize it when I'm doing it. And so when someone like gets awestruck by something I said, it almost like takes me back a little bit, because I don't recognize that as a vulnerable story anymore, because I've repeated it so many times. It's just part of who I am.
But it is. I mean, you talk about role modeling. Your kids you and your wife are the most important people in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in the Army, I had some sergeants that were good and some that were better.
Yeah.
And here I was at 20 years old and insecure, and basic training's pretty rough for when your mother's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned I really needed to be, if I could still be disciplined. That's important. You got to run an organization. People got rules. You got to do things right, but also have the empathy to understand who they are, where they're coming from. How can I help them be better? And but I can tell you, when I went through the anxiety and depression, the thing that got me through it was my family was there, and they were helping me and being there. And so you really want to keep that family structure as strong as you can. I can imagine a lot of people right now living alone, going through this whole situation we're going through with this virus, and nobody at home. And as my wife said last night, our internet went out. So now it's just her and I. We can't even go to our phones, but being alone is that's why people really need to try to keep friendships and help each other. And because there's a time, if you haven't had a tragedy in your life yet, don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah. And I always like to talk about the podcast about like how PTSD, a lot of what happens in war is just accelerated growth. Like you just learn how to grow up a lot, and you learn a lot of lessons that you might not learn for 30 years. And it's just about trying to figure out how you can use those tools and those experiences, bad or good, and try to help as many people, especially your kids. Like there's so many different things that happen in military life that if you can instill 25% of those into your kids, you will create that much stronger of an adult. Something we talk about in the podcast, I'm interested to see your take on it, is legacy. And that legacy is our family. And it's something I didn't start when I created the podcast, but it's now part of my logo. that our legacy is our family. What have you kind of, and I'm sure the legacy of your is just because now you have the time through your kids. Like, what are your sons, and you have two twins, daughters, and a son, right?
No, I have actually, my wife and I got married early. We were very young, so we grew up with our son. We have one son and 3 grandkids.
Okay.
And the grandkids are already 24, 21, and 19. They grew up, they were like our kids when they were growing up. They lived next door down the street, and we had a huge impact on their life. In fact, I tell people jokingly, my grandkids like me better than their parents. So we have a very strong family structure. We look after each other. My granddaughter FaceTimes her grandmother a couple of times a week because she trusts her and want to talk to her. And when she's upset, she calls her grandmother. And so, yeah.
Are there a few words that you think about when you think of your legacy? That you think of what people remember your family name by?
Well, we hear it a lot from people who write to us because I have so much exposure on podcasts and books and things. And my wife and I have been married 51 years, and that hits people right between the eyes. They go, "Oh my God, really?" And I've got a 50-year-old son. I said, "Where'd he come from?" Time goes by fast, and I got these grandkids that are out of college already. I could be a great grandfather any minute, I guess. And people are pretty amazed that I was able to handle my career, my dysfunctional family life early on, and still today, and I grew. That's the thing. I was not this person 25, 30 years ago. I'm totally different than I was. So that's what I tell people. You're not who you're going to be.
That's like a leadership policy that you actually can stop learning when you leave college. Like that never really stops. And as a leader, you're not done till you're dead.
Well, it's true. And if you're around a lot of military officers, they'll tell you that it's always changing. The weapons are changing, the enemy's changing, the strategy's changing. You've got to keep learning, using technology, making sure you got the right experts around you to advise you. And that's in real life too. I mean, one of my best advisors is my wife, because I'm kind of, I take too many risks sometimes, and she straightens me out. And I mean, probably if it wasn't for her, I'd probably be out having a meeting with somebody right now when I'm supposed to be in my house locked in because the governor said so. She said, "We're going to follow this. We're going to set the example. We're not going to go doing it." And so, yeah, it's just, but I know my legacy is today. I would say most my grandkids, I want people to say I was a teacher. They learned from me. That's what I want. I don't want people to say Lee was a jerk, a boss, and he pushed us around and didn't treat us right and didn't understand what we were trying to achieve. I really focus on that really heavily, that because people have so many problems you don't even know about. I mean, in our workforce at Disney and Marriott and Hilton, a lot of those people are living on the edge. I mean, financially, emotionally, maybe 3 kids at home, no father there. I mean, when they come into work, we want the sun to shine for them. I want them to want to come in, not have to come in. And showing respect and treating people. I don't care who it is. Everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants to matter. And that's our job, to make sure they know they matter. Even the introverts, the weirdos, the people that are screwed up. You can bring people around.
Significance is a powerful emotion when you learn how to wield it and gift it as well as a leader.
It's amazing. As my wife said, if you love me, tell me. So everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants to. And the best thing we can do is pay attention to that and think about, who are you going to make matter today? Who are you going to make feel better about their life? Who are you going to reach out to? Talk to your parents as often as you can, your grandparents, because they need that little boost too. And your friends. I'm sure you have friends that are probably suffering from anxiety, depression, a little note card, just saying hello. I mean, those little things matter. I've had a lot of people check in with me this week. Just, Lee, how you doing? Are you okay? I think they think I died because I'm so old, but but I didn't. And those little things matter. I mean, we think, do they matter? Yeah, they matter. And you don't even know the stress your kids might be under, because they know when things are not going on right. Kids during 9/11, kids knew what was going on, even though we didn't turn the TV on. And they were affected by it. They could see adults changing, adults being insecure, adults arguing. You got to be careful. You send out a message. And
you're speaking even when you're not speaking, is what I've learned.
Sure, they're watching you and your wife, and they watch what you say to each other, what you say to somebody on the phone, and they come to you for comfort. And I want people to come to me if I can help them, because I feel I'm not having any stress over the thing we're in right now. But we've only been in it a week, really, here in Orlando, Florida. But I have been there in my life, and I know, boy, it's a dark, dark place. It's a place nobody should want to ever go.
Yeah.
And so
when it first hit, I was full admittedly, I was in caveman mode. I was in primal fear, protecting my family, because at that point everybody was panicking around me. So I'm like, I don't feel like I'm panicking. So does it mean I should be because everybody else is? As I don't go out and buy a bunch of toilet paper, does that make me a bad father that my family will run out 2 weeks from now because I wasn't crazy and fanatic with my toilet paper purchases when everybody was going crazy over it? And
a lot of it.
Through that.
What a lot of it is, I think, when I was your age, overreacted sometimes because I just didn't have the experience.
You don't have that wisdom, a depth of understanding how the life just keeps going.
No. I tell people the three most important things probably are, besides discipline and empathy, are probably, sure, education. You got to know what you're doing, but exposure and experience. Those are things that really grow you inside. Every time you have an experience, it prepares you for something down the road.
And that's a PTSD thing there. A lot of that it's just preparing you for something you don't understand what that's for, or making you ready for something. And this is a point that I nail with every military dad, that we have a view that only 7% of the population has any idea. We have a view of the world, an experience, a connection, a depth that very few Americans have, because we have traveled. We've seen things that most Americans don't even fathom. It's why they're so eagerly to thank us for our service, because they don't understand. And if we can gift that depth and that wisdom, or even just let our kids, like something I want this podcast to be able to do is allow our family to travel internationally. Like a perfect scenario is when my wife's a school teacher, and in the summer, I just want to travel the world for 2 weeks or 2 months and come back when school starts. Like I just want to be exposing my kids to as much of life as possible, because I have this theory at this point, maybe you can prove whether it's true or not, but that if you expose your kids to more of the world, they'll figure out how they fit into the world and then how they can go help change it. But you can't get that from 12 years of school, doing the same thing, never going on a family vacation, never leaving your state. Kids need to get outside of their life to figure out how they fit into life.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, get out of your village.
Yeah.
I lived in Oklahoma in a little village, and I had, I was probably a potential racist and a potential bigot. But I left, went in the Army, went to Washington, D.C., New York, L.A., lived in France for 3 years. I've been to 45 countries now. I see the world a little different. I could never go back. That's what exposure does for your kids. I mean, and even if you're not traveling internationally, you have to expose them to other people and other things and different kinds of camps and different kinds of restaurants and meeting people from other places and having
kind of like experiencing the Epcot Center, where you just get so much diversity in one area. And I mean, that is probably the most diversity some Americans see their entire life.
It probably is.
Which isn't good, but at least it's something.
And the China Pavilion looks a little different than China. So
I've always liked saying that it's important for my kids to, like, someday I want to go to India. I use India as an example, but like to see a kid that has nothing with a smile on his face, because there's so much of American like that comes from that. Your happiness doesn't come from your iPhone or Instagram followers or that number that says how many people care what you post. It comes from what you have on the inside. And if you can be happy with nothing, well, then the world's your oyster. Like you literally can go out and do anything, because it's almost that you're at no expectations, because you're able to be happy without anything in your life that everybody else has to have.
You do adjust to your situation and can find happiness. I've been to India, and you see lots of little kids running around smiling,
and they've got no idea what they're missing out on, but they're just as happy as they've never known in the world that exists.
Well, I didn't have indoor plumbing when I was growing up on the farm, and my brother and I didn't know that was a problem. We thought it was normal.
Yeah.
we said we didn't know we were hot till we went to somebody's house that had air conditioning. So then we got hot, and then we were hot all the time. So you got to be careful what you get exposed to.
What year were you born? Did you grow up in the Depression or just after it?
No, 44. I was born. So, but
your childhood was really the peak of the 50s and the peak of the American dream.
I was there when Elvis Presley showed up, man. I was dancing in the garage.
And your mom was like, "What is that music?"
Yeah, the Baptists didn't like that too much. We found a way to hide from them, and yeah. So yeah, I grew up and so I think exposure is the main thing that made me who I am, because I saw so many different parts of life, and the other thing is I started figuring out that I needed to get with it. So I started going to seminars, reading, paying attention more to managers and leadership. And I was lucky to fall in the hotel business. I liked it. It was a lot of fun. People were from everywhere. I worked in Washington, D.C. People are from every country.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell what country just had a war by who's driving the taxis in town. They've all immigrated, and you'd never see that where I grew up. I mean, it was like I didn't even know some of these places were countries. I had to look them up. I said, "What? I've never heard of that."
Was that something that you created within Disney's culture of adding depth to an employee so that they understood? Because you had a lot of international visitors at Walt Disney, so to be able to empathize with all those, was that something you trained for? Or?
Yeah, we have a traditions course. They all go through it in the beginning. We have a lot of clarity around who's coming. People from 150 different countries. Employees, cast members are from every country in the world working there. We have the international program. So all these college and young people live together in housing. So my son's roommate, when he was on the college program back in the 80s, was from Japan. One was from China. He was there during when they had the issue in China in Red Square there. I forget what it was called.
Tiananmen Square.
Yeah, Tiananmen. His roommate was from there. He learned so much about, his roommate made his own food every day. He didn't like American food. He put it in Tupperware, took it to the cafeteria, and heated. I mean, those exposures, they were exposed to. So the people who work at Disney, if you don't like diversity and inclusiveness, you're not going to be happy there.
Sounds like it has a lot of the recipes for what we need in American society.
It does. In fact, people who are gay, and they will tell you, and they told me many times, Disney World was 10 times better than back at home and back in college, because we don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
All we care about is, can you do the job?
Yeah, how big is your heart?
Could care less where you're from, where you grew up, what language you speak. That's none of my business anyway. And so I would say a lot of people, professors tell us they send us introverts and we send them back extroverts.
I like that. That's good.
You're at Disney for 6 months, you're going to change. And they always tell me, I apologize to the parents. I say, I'm sorry, but your kids are not going to come back home. They'll never come home after they work here.
Yeah.
Because you can't. And some parents are happy and some are not. And the kids.
Like the Marine Corps. I grew up, and I was not the same innocent farm boy that because I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin here as well, and I came back a completely different person. And I remember the look on my dad's face at graduation, and like I was a lot taller, I was more confident. None of that. I would have been least likely voted to join the Marine Corps. So the idea that I did it and came through and got to the other side, like it's a transformation in itself. And it sounds like that's what Disney's able to create as well. And you have to wonder, like, besides,
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think college does that. Anytime you get away, even going away to summer camp.
Mm-hmm.
My grandkids would go to a summer camp in West Virginia, and there were kids coming from there from Russia. Parents that had money were sending their kids over there from all these different countries. And I mean, it was an amazing thing when they came home, what they had learned and their new friends. And yeah, so any kind of exposure you can get outside your own little world that's a good thing.
When we talked at the PodFest, you had mentioned that you did some USO tours to Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, well, I met General Austin. He was the commanding general for U.S. troops in Iraq. And I met him way back 20 years earlier when they were at Disney, getting that training. He became a 4-star, and he had me go to all the bases all over the U.S. and he asked me to come to Iraq, and I did. And I flew to Kuwait. He picked me up in his plane. Actually, I had a 1-star general pick me up. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I was going, wow. I was a private in the Army, so I was like intimidated. And flew to Baghdad, and then they assigned me a helicopter with 2 gunners, a security officer, and a medic. And I traveled all over Iraq for 8 days, and I did 13 seminars talked about anxiety, depression, talked about how to get back in the workforce when you get out of the military, the things that are important. And yeah, it was fabulous. I mean,
what was the message on anxiety and depression? I'm interested to hear.
Well, first here's this guy they introduced, Lee Cockerell, executive vice president of Walt Disney, blah, blah, blah.
And they were like, who the hell is this guy to tell us anything?
I tell them that story of what I went through and anxiety and depression, and I'd never had it before. And it was personal. It was around worrying about my wife, and I didn't even want to see my grandkids. I cared about nothing. I just cared about nothing. And that story resonated with them, that this can happen to them. And I told them what I did about it. Listen, I got a psychologist, I got a psychiatrist. I did meditation every morning online. I got acupuncture on Wednesdays. I worked out every day in the afternoon because that relieved a lot of the stress. I took on anything. I canceled all my work for a year, so I could just focus on getting better, getting healthier, because you can't sleep. And then when you can't sleep, life goes downhill quicker. And I was taking Xanax and stuff like that. I had to work my way off of the drugs because that's the worst thing that can happen, because you really look forward to taking that pill.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, you want that pill. And so I worked my way off of that, and I told them how I did that, and how I got help. That I told people. I told everybody around me, hey, I'm suffering from anxiety and depression. I want them to know. I didn't want to try to hide that too, because that's even like, okay, I got enough already problem. I don't need to be hiding that from people.
Yeah.
And, so I think they saw some good things. They're all young mainly, and said, oh, okay, maybe these are some things I can do. And I see more military people are speaking up now, and officers too, about the issue.
Especially now with the rise in suicide. I'm sure it's 10 times worse than it was when you were doing your travel over there. And I love what you talk about there, that sharing your story, because it's the power of vulnerability, that when you go first, you give someone permission to go second. And that's often what people are waiting for a lot of times when they're in that fear mode of sharing or admitting that they need someone else to cancel out that crap thought in their head that they're the only one suffering from this feeling. And then
especially men. And I hear from a lot of people after that. I'll get an email from them or talk about it, or want to know more about what I was doing or what doctor I used, or they asked me about talk therapy. I said, forget that. Get the drugs. I mean, man, talk therapy could take the rest of your life. And it's a chemical in your brain, and it needs to be resolved. And it took me a long time to get over it. And I worry now I tell my grandkids and my whole family to behave. I said, if you guys get in trouble or do something bad, it's going to make me get depressed again. So my life is in your hands. Behave yourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's always personal things. It's not the business. It's personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's really personal depression. And
that's something when I was studying your story, that I've always resonated with, that as I move into public speaking now on fatherhood, that I have this kind of like tagline that I'm using, that a more connected parent at home creates a more connected employee at work. And a lot of times those aren't talked about. People focus on the silo of the company to try to fix engagement and energy and teamwork, but never really address of what people bring home, or the burden that they carry home. And like, when you're at home, you're thinking about work, and when you're at home, you're thinking about home. And it's a crux that no one talks about. And it's my mission now to talk about it as much as possible, because you can't fix one without really fixing the other, because it's that family component is what fuels everything. And if you don't acknowledge that, you're missing out on a whole bunch of the potential of what you could do as an organization.
Well, you can tell them you only have one life, so you better figure it out, because you don't have two lives. You don't have a business life and a personal life. You have one life. And sometimes people say they have two calendars. I said, no, one calendar. You only have one life.
Yeah. And that part, even the hardest part about the military is it's a noble sacrifice that people understand what you're sacrificing for. But then it also becomes like a drug that makes it easy to hide because no one's really going to call you out for serving too much. And if you don't self-regulate that within your own family, I talked about when families deploy or dads deploy, that you're borrowing time like a credit card and there's interest with that. And you've got to pay it back, the balance and the interest in full before you can borrow again, because that credit card only has so much balance. And eventually, if you don't pay it back, it goes bankrupt. And next thing you know, your life explodes. And if you're on the wrong side of all this, then you convince yourself that your family's better without you.
Well, it's true, and a lot of people do exactly the same thing in business life. I mean, they sacrifice it for the company and their marriage falls apart and then their health falls apart and, everything goes downhill. I mean, I think you're right. Just keep telling them it's connected. Everything is connected. You can't disconnect. And frankly, the responsibility you have to your family. I mean, you got married, you had children, you know how that happened, right? So you got to take care of them.
And I think something you can test by having 51 years of marriage is the priority of your wife within this. So like, she's the commitment to the end of time, that your time in this earth, that's the commitment that's always there. And if you don't prioritize things in life with that order, your kids are eventually going to leave and you're going to have a stranger that you don't know. And you're most likely going to get a divorce because you prioritize in a way that your kids weren't important, or your kids were the important part and your spouse was the back burner.
Well, and my wife's father was in the Navy for 32 years, and he was deployed to the South Pacific, and he was she knew what it was like. I mean, so I was lucky. I had somebody who had been through moving around, moving all the time, having to make new friends.
Mm. Dad had empathy for this situation.
Yeah. So, a lot to think about there.
Yeah, it's just not talked about enough. Like it's just the dark secret of the military that there's always these programs on base and there's always these different outreaches, but there's so much of it that I think comes from like the way America is set up to just kind of focus on work and being the cycle of work and workaholics, that it almost just keeps you chasing something that doesn't actually ever come to your life, or you keep thinking you'll reach a point that you'll cross a finish line. But at the same time, you never really cross that finish line. It's just this crutch that keeps repeating itself. And you wake up when you're 40. And I think this is why we have midlife crisis, because you wake up at 40 and realize the first part of your life is all backwards and it's over and you don't feel like you've got a chance to live. And it's and even on the other side of all this coronavirus, I hope that part of it we realized of what we're missing, not being a connected family, and that maybe you notice your kids growing up faster than you really thought they were. And it was like the first day we were homeschooling here, and my son was counting on his nose. And I never really had noticed that he used his nose to count with his fingers. And I was just like, how cute is that? And I was like, I noticed that moment because he was here, and now I noticed it. And it's something I was present for to notice. But so much of life happens in that random click moment that you don't get a chance to do it.
And you better notice your wife more too.
Exactly, and figure out what that conversation. And my wife being a teacher, her world is getting turned up, and figuring out how to support during all of that is something new and challenging. But like you've talked about, it's all about growth and everything. Like this is just this is like the largest exercise of growth globally since like World War II. And everyone globally is growing at exponential rate that they were never doing before at all levels of people in society. No matter where you are, you're growing at a pace that you never were probably before all this.
Yep, that's exactly right. As long as you keep a balance about what's happening and don't let it get away from you. And this will be over like everything else.
Is there something you're growing through on this? Like, is there anything new that you picked up as a new challenge during the hibernation that you're going to try and learn a new skill or master something?
Well, I am. My partner and I are working on some new courses. I'm getting invitations. I have several already lined up to talk to college students online because they're sitting at home and they still have classes. So I'm doing that. and just my wife and I had our workout yesterday with our trainer. He immediately put it online, so we had a two face-to-face on the phones, and we did our workout right here. We do strength training and agility and balance training twice a week, and so we didn't miss a beat. It's an easy time to say I haven't gained a pound. I'm
That's
not
good.
eating more because I'm not stressed out, but the exercise helps. I'm reading even more than I did.
How are you in the kitchen?
I'm a good cook. I took cooking classes when I lived in Washington over at a group that gave cooking classes to all the embassy cooks in Washington.
Oh.
I took them on Sunday afternoon, so I'm pretty handy in the kitchen. My wife likes that, so I'm even better at doing dishes. So I did a little KPA in the Army. I peeled a lot of potatoes because the potato machines were broken when I was there once.
Yeah, I can imagine that all of it is it's good and it's exciting to grow through it, and it's just it's an interesting time to do a lot of self-reflection as well.
Well, and you talking to your kids, you have a chance now to really connect deeper than you had before. I mean, I call my granddaughter. She's sitting at home in her apartment in Boulder because school's out, and she's available. So we just have good calls and talk about what's going to do when this is over. And her school has canceled graduation and she said she went ahead and bought her cap and gown anyway because she's going to wear it somewhere. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know where, but that was fun, and she put it on for us, and we had a fun day talking about it. So I mean, there's think about if we didn't have the internet and television and the phone, we'd all go nuts.
Yeah, it would be it'd be like if it would just be back to like back in the radio days. It would be essentially the mode where you wouldn't have television. Well, if it was recorded, you could just repeat it, but you still need people to work this broadcast studio. So
I even got that. We didn't get a TV till I was in the 5th grade.
No.
So I had an area where we listened to the radio, and I remember that seemed to be okay. I mean, it's just what we did, and we played Monopoly. And I don't know, it was just like you adjust to your environment, and you don't have any choice really. Mm-hmm. But I think if you do things on purpose, you'll get a lot out of this. Like if you think about doing certain things on purpose with your kids this week. Things, just decide what it is, and then tell them we're going to do that together, and they'll get excited, and then you do it and tell them what day you're going to do it, and get them ready and give them something to do to prepare for it, whatever it is.
Yep. I started early in the podcast. My first thing was reminding every dad that the secret to fatherhood is that the kids spell love Time. That at the end of the day, it's not the big stuff. It's not all the fancy trips. They just want the gift of your time. Like you can move their mountains for them with 10 minutes and just playing trains. Or my 3-year-old, we just roll the ball back on the floor, and she's as happy as a kid in a candy store.
Exactly. My grandkids used to come over here. They go in my garage and make a wooden sword. That was more, they make a mess, but they made a sword. Mm-hmm. That was their big deal. Or one time we had a big box, and I put them in it. I made an airplane out of it. They had to give me their ticket. And they got in it. I shook the box for takeoff. I'd shake it. Okay, we're taking off now. I think back about that. Those things were probably more fun for me too, because it's amazing. They had to make the tickets. We gave them paper and pen. They had to make tickets, and then we had to distribute them. And you had to give your ticket to get in the box. And
that'd be a cool thing if you could make a sword for your son as something through all of this in the garage, where
exactly.
You could figure out a way to make a sword.
Right? I have a sword right here that those kids made, and they leave it here because they are looking for it every time they come to my house.
And it's those little memories that people use as those anchor core memories when they grow up. Like that's what they're going to remember about Grandpa more than that he worked at Disney. Even like they'll remember that silly sword that was there that they always wanted to have.
It's true, and so.
And that's why it's so important to create those memories, because if you don't, then they just get filled with the crap of the internet, which isn't good.
So that's the thing. Think about what you're going to do on purpose this week.
Yeah.
What are you going to do on purpose tomorrow? Not just by accident.
I like that. I think you actually answered the final question that I like to wrap up with. What advice would you like to leave for other military veteran dads out there? But I don't know if you got another piece of advice you want to leave, but that's pretty good of what you want to do out there on purpose this week with your kids.
Yeah, for any of them. And on purpose, they might want to go see a psychiatrist. And on purpose, they may want to start taking Accupunk. On purpose, they may want to have a friend to talk to every day. I mean, and sometimes when you're in depression, you need somebody to help you think that through.
You can't think through it on your own.
I was so screwed. I'd had friends call me and just came over and sat on the outside here and talked to me. I mean, that was amazing. And by the way, when you're preoccupied, you don't suffer as much. When you're talking to somebody, or even when I'm giving a speech, anxiety. When I was suffering from anxiety and depression, when I'd get up and give a speech, it would all go away. That adrenaline was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then an hour after I finished it, it came back in your mind. So distraction is a good thing too. And being with your kids, having fun, distraction is really important to distract yourself from the worries of the day as best you can. And
anchoring them in like the positive, like I've always liked positive psychology as an area to study, and how like focusing on the positive different parts of outcomes can actually get your brain go away from that negative side, that you can just keep kind of thinking of that, and your mind will start using that as a default. And I like what you admitted there.
My psychologist told me one thing I could do. He said, every day, Lee, around 4:30 after you do your little workout, I have a Stairmaster here. He said, sit on your couch and just worry about everything you want to worry about. Make a list of it and go down and worry about your finances, he said, and then when you wake up in the middle of the night, you'll have kind of dealt with it. It'll help you say, okay, when you're rational, because in the middle of the night, you're not rational. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything's 10 times worse. And I thought that was an interesting. So I'd sit on my couch just to worry about my health, worry about depression, worry about my grain. And then because 90% of that stuff wasn't even true. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just like everything became a big deal. Every little thing became a big deal.
Yeah. And then when you wake up, that's the worst part. When you wake up, like all of that just kind of hits you at work, and you got to relive that anxiety every morning and work through it.
Terrible. Yeah. So don't underestimate what you can do. Do a lot. Maybe you need help. Maybe you need a friend. Maybe you need some help, but don't sit by yourself. That's all I tell people. Don't sit and try to resolve it by yourself.
Mm-hmm. I've always liked Albert Einstein, learning about his theories. And I use one of theirs quite often that he theorized that you could time travel if you could bend light back in on itself to the same point. But you can't bend light back in on itself to the same point, which is why you can't really self-reflect on your own crap, because you can't fully see everything you need to see, which is why you need someone else to be that mirror for you. Because that's you can't bend your own light back.
That's why you need a wife.
True. Which most people don't admit when your wife gives you those hard pieces of advice, myself included, that you reflect back a week later and like, damn it, she was right.
Yeah, they get it.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to make you better, and you have to go in with that mindset that they're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to lift you up at the same time.
And by the way, they had the children, not you.
True. Always that point there in the background.
All right, my friend.
Well, Lee, I really appreciate you taking the time on this Wednesday to help a few military dads out. And I'm really excited I got to randomly run into you and have this conversation. And hopefully this isn't the only time we ever talk. Hopefully this is the beginning of a good friendship. And I'm excited the next time we talk.
So if you get too stressed out with your wife, give me a call. I'll talk you down.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. And thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.